if you are curious to know more about our programs, you can always check out our website as well at distillarts.org. That's DSTLARTS.org. Um, and the reason why we're here tonight specifically is to actually go over the ideas or the concepts behind marketing and self-promotion. And so, to kind of introduce anybody to who Distil Arts who hasn't maybe had the opportunity to know what we are a nonprofit arts mentorship organization that inspires, teaches, and hires emerging artists from underserved communities. The acronym in our name stands for Develop Skills and Transcend Limits Through the Arts. And specifically, we're the kind of organization that really wants to support our community in telling their stories as they see fit. Today is very much about storytelling and self promotion. So it was nice that we had a little bit of that already going on at the very beginning. All of our programs include some element of storytelling, be it through publishing or through our podcast, our Art Block podcast. We, of course, also have Artistic Zine and Conchas y Café Zine, as well as Art Block Zine, which are all different venues for publishing work by emerging artists from across LA County, or in the case of Artistic Zine, across the country. Conchas y Café is also a bilingual creative writing workshop series that goes 15 weeks. Currently, it's at the tail end of its first semester, but the next semester of classes starts in January. And specifically, the program that is offering tonight's seminar is our Poet Artist Development Program. To review briefly, for those of you joining in on Zoom, our wonderful mentees, last time that we had our professional development seminar, we talked about project development, specifically artist projects and how to develop one of those. And we did discuss the fact that artist projects can look differently based on what your business plan is. It could be an individual product, or a service, such as a workshop series that you might be planning. And the way to go about that, to begin planning, is to obviously define your goals and then establish your assets or your resources and the things that you need. And it's very important to remember that there are three types of resources: time, people, and finances. So when developing your particular artist projects, remember to consider all of these things. And specifically, it's important to remember that a budget is a moral document. So as you begin planning the finances and really taking assessment of your various resources that you have available to you, it's important that you account for all of your expenses, especially your time, because your time is worth something. It is valuable. And if this is going to be a career for you, then I also suggest including your overhead costs, things like your internet bill, your rent, your utilities. All of those things are things that do have an impact on your ability to create an artist project. Evaluation is always a part of that as well. And we did cover, different sort of techniques that you can use to evaluate your work. But again, financing is going to be probably the biggest concern that you might have. We did cover how to budget, and you were provided with a sample budget and a template for creating your own working organizational budget as a business owner. And there's different ways in which you could finance a project. It would always be, important to look at things like artist grants and fellowships. That's always a way to fund a project. There's, of course, the fees that you would collect from either, attending, having people attend a workshop that you host, or you maybe even doing like a speaking engagement kind of thing. And then, of course, product pre-orders. Like if you're doing a book, you want people to pre-order that book. That'll help you offset some of the costs associated with printing a book. And then crowdfunding. We did touch on it very briefly last time. But one of the things that we did mention was that a successful crowdfunding campaign happens through active engagement with your audience or followers. And that does bring us to tonight's session, which is again about marketing and self promotion. These are some very important tools that we have available to us as business owners, as working artists. And really, in the end, it comes down to what Ryan Lilly, this American business incubation professional, has been quoted as saying: corporate and personal branding both require storytelling to be captivating. Stories provide context, meaning, and the opportunity for relationship. So, what does this particular quote say to you, our wonderful mentees attending tonight? How do you interpret this particular quote? Any ideas of what he means by corporate and personal branding requires storytelling to be captivating? Thank you, Mojde. Mojde writes, stories are about wording facts. Jamie adds, I think it means you need human stories incorporated into branding to feel relatable to a wider audience. Yes, because you are selling to other humans. Right, exactly.
I mean, that's also why we have so many celebrities sponsoring different brands, or the other way around. We have Jordan, we have other artists who put their face and their stories behind products or even themselves. And basically, because we attach products or things to stories.
Mhm. Yeah, and Jamie added in the chat, yeah, and I think it really makes or breaks a product's attractiveness. Very good, yeah. I think it's also maybe to a certain degree an element of like nostalgia, because we begin to associate our own story with the stories of the brand or of the product. I just finished watching, as I was enjoying my early dinner, a little YouTube video about the history of particular foods, lunch foods from the 90s. And one of them was one that I grew up with in the 80s, Capri Sun, and how much I enjoyed Capri Suns. And, there's a certain amount of nostalgia that I associate with the Capri Sun and how, it was kind of expensive to buy. And same thing with the High C Ecto Cooler and how those things were very, um, out of reach for me growing up. And when my mom and dad were able to afford it on occasion, it became, like I said, a part of my story, part of what made me feel good is, even if it was just something that was branded with Ghostbusters, the real Ghostbusters, like, it was something that I just had a good feeling about, you know. Yeah, good feelings being associated with marketing material is really effective. That's right. Thank you, Jamie.
I think storytelling, sorry
And
to
then
butt in.
Majda added in the chat, personal stories can be unique, enjoyable, and yeah, go ahead, Roots.
Oh, I was just gonna say that when you sell something, what you're buying, it's not just the product, it's what the product makes you feel. And so that's the same thing that goes with our work.
Mhm. Right. It's about, like it says here, the opportunity for relationship, right? It's a person buys a particular product because of whatever relationship they have with the idea behind the product, right? The story that the product is selling to you. Um, I don't know about you, but I remember when I was a little boy, I would get new shoes and I would immediately make the association of, me being like, an athlete that I liked. And in that particular time period, it would have been Michael Jordan. Even if they weren't Jordans, even if they weren't even branded Nikes, I would be like, oh yeah, now I can run fast and jump high like Michael Jordan. So kind of like what Abraham was saying before, it's about these connections that we make. Yeah. So this is where definitely, marketing and self-promotion can start to, maybe tie into your own practice as an artist. Because in the end, like we said, good crowdfunding and, people buying and being interested in your work, it's not so much because they're going to like the work right away. It's really more because they find a particular connection with you and your work that speaks to them and who they are. So, it starts to kind of snowball into this idea of, what is story, and really what is your story, because in the end that's what people will connect with. They'll connect with you based on your story, because in some way it's a shared personal experience. Some might call this community, and I have here a loose definition for us. Community is a human-centered action that occurs through the recognition of shared personal experiences. And it kind of comes down to this concept of commonality and universality. Commonality in that there are perhaps certain experiences that you may have lived that are common among the group with whom you identify with, right? There's, to a certain degree, some truth in certain stereotypes. For me, as a Latino, as a Mexican American, growing up in San Diego in the southwest of the U.S., there are certain things that I can point to and say, these are common things that we experience as Latinos. Univision playing in the background, the famous San Marcos blanket, and how it would always come out around this time of year. The fact that in my house, at least, we would heat up the house by actually using the oven, because we didn't have a, heater or any kind of, system like that within our house. There's certain things that become common and at the same time universal, because you don't necessarily have to be a working class Latino to have experienced some of those things too. That might be a somewhat universal experience based on a person's income level or based on a person's education level. Cultural background sometimes is not the same as like a economic background or as an educational background. Sometimes those things blur together and create these links between different types of communities that exist. And that's what universality can speak to. So as you think about your story, what are experiences that you feel comfortable sharing with the world that are not only unique to your particular group, but also universal to other groups? You know, the immigrant story is not just about people coming from Latin America. It's also a story that relates to people coming to the United States from other countries in the world, from other continents. That's a particular kind of experience that is universal in the end. So, to get you thinking about your story, I have a question for you. What are your personal values and beliefs, and how did those get formed? Take a quick second here. Feel free to add any of these things in the chat now, but this might be a good opportunity for you to start writing down some of these things that you would want to articulate, whether that be on your social media or just even for yourself later when you're developing your business plan. So I'll give you like about 2 minutes right now, and just write down a couple of key phrases or words that reflect your personal values and beliefs, and maybe what got you to believe in those things, be it family, personal experience, you know, school, education. Again, if you want to share them in the chat, you're welcome to share them. But I do recommend that you write down a few of these words on a sheet of paper or somewhere where you can reference them later. So again, if you want to share some in the chat, you're welcome to do so. For the sake of time, though, we're going to continue on. But again, make sure that you do keep these handy, because it will really help to reference them later. Thank you, Abraham, for sharing. Change the world for the better by looking at the shit show that it is. Excellent. And Mojde added, gave my hands to the hands of winds, saw my lips, lips, I guess, with you. I think there might be some typos there, but Ah, your smiles, with your smiles. Okay. Thank you, Mojde. Okay. So yeah, so it's a nice little phrase there that Mojde came up with. Abraham, nice and direct. I like it. So again, what is story? Well, the idea that you can create community, and maybe even um some kind of like nurturing environment within a particular space does come down to the same thing that I just read to you, right? Community is a human centered action that occurs through the recognition of shared personal experiences. Where the first one, we were talking about things that are human centered and shared personal experiences, action and recognition are also really important parts of creating community and telling your story. Because in the end, part of what social media and all marketing attempts to do is that it attempts to give people a space to build a relationship with you, right? So not only do you have to build it, but you also have to maintain it. You have to nurture it. So as you're thinking about a marketing strategy or a social media strategy, you want to kind of ask yourself, how do your actions nurture your ability to cultivate relationships? And by actions, it's not just, the things that you post and who you post it to or with or who you tag. It's also, the content that you post, right? And it's the type of stories that you're encouraging people to share with you. Reciprocity is difficult on certain social media platforms, but if you're inviting people to comment, on say like I don't know, an Instagram post, that comment, that invitation to comment should be something that you are hopefully engaging with later too. Replying to comments helps to create this sense of reciprocity. It creates that sense of like you're not just putting stuff out there for people to consume. You're putting it out there because you want to have a relationship with your audience. It's also useful to remember that a lot of times this is curated, right? So technology allows you to pick and choose and curate your story. You don't have to share every single part of your life. In fact, that is probably not a good idea on social media, especially. You want to be very deliberate about the purpose for sharing something. So you curate it so that it does create relationships and those opportunities to build the relationship. But it's also really important to remember that as you post something, especially as a working artist, you're essentially functioning as a business. And so you'd want your posts to articulate your values as an individual and as a brand. This is where, it kind of starts to blur the line as independent artists. And yes, you can post until you get a movie deal, Abraham. But yeah, unmonitored Twitter accounts are dangerous. And that is obviously something that we will address. The prevalence of bots and spam accounts and that kind of thing. They don't help the argument in favor of social media, but that doesn't necessarily mean that social media isn't a tool for you as an individual, as an artist, as a working professional. But again, it's really important to understand that we're talking about you not just as an individual, but also as a brand, right? So as you think about your personal values, it's also important to think about your brand's values, your brand's goals, and also your mission. And just like with the personal values, take a quick minute and write down a couple of words. But if you're struggling with that, consider this: the overlap between your personal values and beliefs and your brand values and goals, that is ultimately what your mission and your organizational story will be. These two kind of independent areas will overlap as working artists. As independent artists, in the end, what people are buying is kind of like a portion of us, right? They're buying something that we create with our own, vulnerabilities, with our own creativity. And, people connect to it because it's our unique story that we're telling and that we're presenting to the world. And at the same time, it's that kind of story that makes up the values of our brand, right? And obviously, our brand can have certain kinds of goals, like creating work that is exceptional, right? That would be a goal of our brand. It could also be that we have a goal of serving underserved populations, right? That would be a goal. And that would be something that would be informed by our personal value of maybe equality and equity. So, take a quick minute here to maybe create your own Venn diagram on a separate sheet of paper, right? Um, Kind of trace this and see what you come up with. See what are the things that are overlapping in both areas. Um, I like what Mojde says in the chat there. We're selling our life minute by minute. In a way, yes, chapter by chapter. So again, I'll give you like about a minute or two to maybe flesh out your brand values and goals. But by no means should you expect to have your organizational mission and story ready for sharing yet. This is just a primer. This is a way for you to get started on creating that for yourself. If you do feel compelled to share in the chat, though, some words or concepts that are popping up in your mind, please go ahead and share. It's always good for the conversation. And for our people joining in on Instagram Live or on the other live streams, you're welcome to also share in the comments some of your thoughts on anything that I present, as well as questions. Do my best to answer questions. So, one of these things that we are going to revisit a few times is the concept of design thinking. And this is where the Venn diagram kind of, comes in. That is one of the tools that we can use in design thinking. Design thinking itself is a process for creative problem solving. And one of the approaches that a person could take when talking about design thinking is to break it down into three overlapping concepts: desirability, feasibility, and viability. And the thing that I personally like about design thinking is that it's generally defined as a human centered, non-linear process. It's something that a lot of companies use to develop different strategies for providing a solution to a problem. And it's a way for organizations and companies to sometimes develop new tools for serving a customer or a user base or an audience. But when we talk about things like desirability, what we're talking about is kind of like, what is it that makes something appealing to the human perspective, to the human point of view? How can you make something be more desirable? Storytelling, like we talked about a minute ago, is one of those ways that that we make things desirable. Those celebrity endorsements, the, you know, maybe branding jargon that makes a person feel like, oh, this is the latest and greatest technology since sliced bread, when in fact it might not be the latest and greatest. So that kind of element of storytelling is where desirability can come in. Now, the more practical would be things like feasibility. And this is where you would be asking yourself what is realistically achievable given the available technologies, right? What can you actually accomplish given the resources that you have, which blends into viability, right? If you don't have the money to maybe, buy a $5,000 camera, well, what can you really potentially afford, right? What is feasible? And what can you actually do with maybe a camera that is $1,000? Is it the same thing? Is it cost effective? And is it sustainable? A lot of times, viability refers to sustainability. So, this is another way to look at it. This is a kind of like the visual element or visual interpretation of design thinking, right? You have feasibility, which is your technology and skill centric ideas. You have desirability, which is human centric, right? What is the thing that is most appealing to a human experience? And then viability, that's all about your resources. Remember, there's three different kinds of resources to consider: your people resources, time resources, and funds, the cash. Where all of those things overlap, that is your solution to whatever problem you're trying to solve. And this is something that you may want to consider doing as you develop a business plan, which again was one of the previous seminars that we did. But again, this is only one approach. There's many different ways in which you can approach the development of your business plan and your products and your artist projects and all of that. But it is useful to know that, desirability is one of the cornerstones of this way of thinking. Social media. This is kind of, one of those things where like all of us recognize that social media has a lot of flaws, right? Nothing is perfect in the world. But that said, social media is still the storyteller's best friend. It's the one tool that is available to everyone or almost everyone. And it is a tool that allows us to really tell stories in a way that we have never really been able to do so before. But marketing and self promotion are not exactly the same thing. Marketing is a strategic means for storytelling. Marketing is, I would say, almost a deliberate way of crafting and disseminating stories. So, think of it as a long-term strategy that would involve things like newsletters or e-newsletters. Services like MailChimp, are accessible. They are free to start. And, it's a way for you to send out updates through email, about products, services, events, activities, things that you might have coming up. You can always invest in print. And of course, email is probably the cheapest way to go. Advertisements, both print and digital ads are also part of a strategy of, marketing a product or, a service. It's really about reaching a particular demographic. It's a targeted messaging system. That's where advertisements would play a role. And then word of mouth. We really can't ignore the fact that people still ultimately make the decision as to whether or not a product is worth supporting. And a lot of times that comes from word of mouth. Think about all the different times where you have maybe visited a restaurant or a coffee shop, or maybe, you bought a product because of word of mouth. Maybe it was a product that you used growing up, and so you never stopped using it as an adult. I know for me, that would be something like Comet. I never questioned it. Just Comet, the powdered dish soap is something that I've used since I was little, and it's something I'll always probably use until the end, Um, or like Fabuloso, Fabuloso is maybe not the best detergent out there, but it's the detergent that I grew up smelling. And so, that's going to be the detergent that I continue to use. Uh, So, word of mouth, it can definitely have a long lasting impact on a marketing strategy. Self promotion, on the other hand, is your ability to tell a story. So it's a crafted story that is used to sell either an image or an idea of a brand. It can also be just a brand that it's attempting to sell. And also it tries to, sell us on the purpose of a product. Um, it is deliberate and it is a very curated thing as well. And it's also something that is really designed to reinforce the identity of a brand. That's how that self-promotion, storytelling kind of apparatus works, right? It's all about increasing your brand's desirability. From a human point of view, what are you doing to make people want your product, want the image of, XYZ brand? How are they aligning with that? That is a question to ask yourself. It's also really good as a person who is, exploring using social media and other marketing tools as a way to tell their brand's story. It's good for you to ask yourself this question, when it comes to socializing, are you more introverted or extroverted? And this actually does play a role in how you engage on social media specifically. Now, here are some fun facts. This is the latest information from Sprout Social. That is a website that collects data across all social media platforms. Of course, these are the top four, right? These are maybe the most popular ones. X, aka Twitter. Honestly, I don't know anybody that calls it X without calling it Twitter at the same time. And then there's, of course, TikTok, Facebook, and Instagram. And if we look here, we'll start to notice some interesting kind of, what do we call it? Some interesting data when it comes to all of these social media platforms. Now, I'm making this bigger so we can see it as best as possible here. But if you notice, Twitter's largest age group, the most engaged age group, is between the ages of 18 and 29 years old. That's 42% of their users. The second largest age group, is the 30 to 49-year olds. And that's 27%. That is, if you actually add that up, 69% of all users on Twitter, aka X, that is, they are between the ages of 18 and 49. And it's predominantly men. There are more men active on Twitter than there are women. We're talking about 61%, 61.3% versus 34.1. You know, with everything that's happened with the acquisition of Twitter by Elon Musk, there was a moment there where people were starting to abandon ship. But according to Sprout Social, they really haven't actually lost that many users. In fact, they've stayed more or less the same. Granted, that might mean that there are maybe more bots, more fake accounts. Um, but either way, it has stayed relatively the same. And they've also, this is also self-reported information, so maybe take it with a grain of salt. But according to the data that's been presented, 33%, about 33% of the users on Twitter are college educated and earn 75,000 a year. Now, that may not mean a whole lot to you at this moment, but once you start thinking about how you want to price your merchandise, this gives you a good sense of who is on Twitter and how much money they might actually have available to them. Keep in mind that in certain places, $75,000 is just kind of getting by, like in LA County. You're probably comfortable, maybe don't have a ton of expendable, money, but in other places in the world, that's a pretty decent amount of money that you're bringing in. TikTok is by far the most popular among pretty much everybody. People spend about 45 minutes a day on TikTok. And we're talking about a user base that is 36.2% between the ages of 18 and 24, and 32.9% between the ages of 25 and 34. So a similar overlap with Twitter. We do have more women on TikTok than men on TikTok. But yeah, 45 minutes a day. More people are on TikTok for a longer period of time than pretty much any other social media platform. And that's actually down from almost an hour and a half last year. When we did this presentation last year, um, according to the data, people were spending almost 90 minutes a day on TikTok. So it has dropped by half, but that's still the highest amount of time spent on a single social media site. Facebook and Instagram are kind of like the OGs of this now. Um, yeah, you really got to make that TikTok, but we'll talk about that in a moment. Um, Facebook and Instagram, again, these are kind of like the OGs of the social media realm. Facebook has still a very active user base, um, predominantly men, which is kind of interesting to me. There's more men who are on Facebook, 56% versus 44% females. And then the actual largest age group, is the 25 to 34-year-olds. And even within this, it's way more men. If I remember correctly, this 29.9% breaks down to something kind of ridiculous, like 17% of these people. 17% of this number is men, and then the remaining 12% is women. So it is a lot more of a male dominated space, Facebook. And again, these men are spending about half an hour a day on TikTok. Instagram is the one that is maybe closer to parity. You have 48.2% of women and 51.8% of men in terms of the gender breakdown of their active users. And their two age groups that are the most active are also millennials, um, between the ages of 18 to 24 and 25 to 34, both equally 30%-ish. Gen Z and millennials do make up 2/3 of Instagram's user base, but it's also really important to note that Reels, the short videos that you post on TikTok, are what are driving engagement the most. It's basically the ripoff of TikTok. That is what is the most engaging content that you'll find on Instagram, or engaged content. Um, it's also worth talking about something that probably nobody really uses in everyday kind of senses. LinkedIn is actually a very engaging platform. 63% of LinkedIn users log on weekly, and 22% of them log on daily. They have a very large number of users, and their user base is very millennial. I mean, we're talking about 31% between the ages of 30 and 39, and 23% between the ages of 40 and 49. Of course, this is a space that is primarily professionals, and it is more for business to business. So if you are working as like a consultant, if you're offering, like, say, copywriting or copy editing services as writers, this is probably going to be the place where you go and get gigs for the professionals in the world. Um, and it is a very high earning space. People who are on LinkedIn make a significant amount of money. Usually it's because they're, doing work for larger corporations. So it's very much more like a corporate centric or business centric platform. Pinterest has actually changed since the last time we did this research. Pinterest's largest age group is now millennials, ages 25 to 34. And this hasn't changed. It's still predominantly women. It's 76.2% women. The average amount of time that women are spending on there, or men, the small amount of men, is 14 minutes per day. So it's not a lot. But approximately 70% of the users on Pinterest use it to research products. So if you're selling a product and people want to know about it, they're probably going to use Pinterest as a way to do research on it to see if it's any good. It's also really worth noting that 45% of their users have a household income of over $100,000 a year. So that's where the money is, if you're trying to sell a particular kind of product, um, especially a product that appeals to women. Snapchat is the place for kids. Ultimately, it is, from the ages of 13 to 24. It's young people who are driving Snapchat. It is kind of the space where you want to go and follow trends, really. These 13 to 17-year-olds and 18 to 24-year-olds spend about half an hour a day on Snapchat. And it's definitely the space where you want to go and follow trends as they develop. It's going to be cool on Snapchat before it becomes cool on TikTok. And then I think it's really important to also know that over 70% of all internet users access YouTube on a regular basis. YouTube is not something that we would necessarily consider a social media platform, but I think it's worth noting that a lot of people use YouTube on a regular basis. In fact, more minutes are spent on YouTube per day by an individual user than even on TikTok. It's only a minute more, but it's still, you know, a very significant chunk of people's day. It's also worth knowing that YouTube is the place where people go for entertainment. So if you are producing videos of you performing your work, of you maybe singing or doing things like that that are related to your practice as a poet, as a writer, as an artist, that might be the space where you can create content that gets monetized through ad revenues or through sponsorships, brand sponsorships. That's probably the most common thing that you will see actually on YouTube is content creators that are sponsored by brands. And so this is definitely a space that is worth maybe considering as part of your particular business strategy. And I'm with you on that one, Jamie. I love YouTube as well. I spend a lot of time actually on YouTube, maybe more than I should. Um, some people like to call it even YouTube University because that's where they learn how to do a lot of things. So, yeah, right, exactly. It's Skillshare, but free. um, Now, I believe it was last year where the whole Distill Arts team went to the Adobe Max conference here in LA. And Angie and I both sat in on a couple of different social media marketing focused seminars. And one of the things that we heard on a regular basis, and I know Angie probably heard it better than me, it was that, be a specialist is this number one tip that we heard is be a specialist and really focus your efforts on developing your audience. But in order to do so, don't spread yourself thin. That was one of the things that came up. Develop your following on one platform. If it's going to be TikTok, then really develop your following on TikTok. If it's going to be Instagram because you see that there is, more of a universal appeal to your work, and if Instagram is the platform where you can do a mix of video and imagery, then go with that platform. But if it's going to be something like, I don't know, maybe it's Snapchat, and you want your work to be highly influenced by, younger people, then find that, create that account there. Really understand where your audience is, right? Know your audience, your community, your demographic, and really engage with them where they are. And for the purposes of, developing your audience, really just use one single branded account per platform. I've seen people have multiple accounts on places like Instagram, where their name will be used repeatedly, or it'll be, maybe different configurations. Maybe one is for visual art, one is for, literary art. I tried to do that for my own personal artwork, and it was just way too much, right? I was spreading my brand thin. It was not really helping me engage with people. So really just keep one account for the one platform that is going to serve all of your particular needs for your brand. And again, just really try to develop your following on one platform and then expand only if and when it makes sense to do so. um, just again, be a specialist. Try to really stay focused on the work that you're doing. Now, knowing this information, right, which team are you? Are you team Twitter, team TikTok, team Facebook, team Instagram? Really think about which platform is going to serve you the best, beginning now, even. If you're on all of them, that's great. I'm sure that you have a lot of fun. Um, you know, but if you're really thinking about this in a very like deliberate branded way, which one are you going to focus on first? All right. I see Dorothea's TikTok and IG. Yeah, these two are probably the easiest to manage since you could cross post, right? Angie's definitely about Instagram. By the way, Distill Arts is on all of these, and I do have to say that Instagram has been the one that we get the most engagement on. Yeah, yes to cross posting. Now, here's the one thing though to really kind of think about, and we're kind of guilty of doing this in terms of the Distill Arts promotional machine. But if you're cross posting, like say you do a post on TikTok, right? And your TikTok is even got that little made on TikTok watermark or whatever, and then you cross post it without making any modifications to Instagram, consider this. Is the content that you're posting on TikTok going to have any, specific purpose on Instagram aside from just being the same exact thing, the same repeated thing? Or are you customizing your content for each one? Because think of it this way. Why should somebody follow you on TikTok if they get the same information on Instagram? And vice versa. If they're going to get the same information, then what's the point of having the Instagram or the TikTok? Especially when you consider the fact that both of them have the same sort of function as each other through reels, right? An Instagram reel is literally no different from a TikTok video. Maybe the demographic base is going to be a little bit bigger on TikTok than on Instagram, right? Or maybe you want to reach more women, so go with the TikTok. But if you really have work that is kind of gender neutral, maybe Instagram is enough. So really think about that as you think about which social media platform you want to focus on. Because again, when you're developing your brand and you're developing your following, it's always going to be better to do one at a time and then you expand as needed. Um, no, actually, our TikTok is probably very sad if you go to it. Um, we don't do dance challenges or nothing, but
Luis, here's your chance. Do it.
yeah, I know. I'm seeing the suggestion in the chat. It might go viral. Yeah, that's true. Actually, one of the things, and this is kind of like a little side tangent type of thing. Um, and Angie is right. We don't really know how to TikTok because personally, I really can't stand the platform. However, I do recognize that it is, a platform where there are a lot of people and a lot of information gets shared. To that end, we have been developing a Distill Arts mascot. The mascot will happen at some point. It's going to be a puppet, and I believe TikTok will be the place where the puppet will most likely live, or at least get most of its recognition. But yeah, more to come on that. But see, that is one way in which we are going to utilize the uniqueness of TikTok, right? Whereas Instagram has generally been the place where it's easiest to find information about our programs. Um, yeah, I'll leave the intrigue there out in the world. Yes, Abraham, do you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, before we move on the apps, I just realized also like the big differences is, I guess, YouTube and all these other ones like Instagram or perhaps TikTok. It's not as much as the connectivity of it, like Facebook. Instagram, you well usually used to follow people, and those are the people who you see their content. YouTube, not
Mhm.
as much. I think it's just more like searching for things or things that being suggested to you, and that's how you connect with it. You don't have that connection to like friends or other things.
Yeah, like I said before, YouTube, if you want to use YouTube as part of your strategy for, sharing your work, TikTok, is video centric, but TikTok is a way to share information. They're short little videos. YouTube has something that they call YouTube Shorts, which is very similar to TikTok. But ultimately, YouTube is a place that is for entertainment. It's the place where people go to be entertained or to learn something, not so much for interaction. The functionality is there. I don't want to say it's not, but it's not really the purpose of it. Whereas TikTok, if you're going to be video centric, then yeah, that's probably the place to go. Instagram is kind of a blending of a few different things. It's maybe the best or worst of Facebook, and the best of TikTok, which is just the videos, right? So that would be maybe where Instagram can fit into your particular uh, brand strategy or marketing strategy. But these are definitely things to think about. Going back to what I was saying before, marketing and self promotion is an investment. And it is something that if you kind of approach it with the design thinking principles that we talked about, this may be a way for you to better understand your investment of time and resources, right? Comes down to desirability. Which platform, when you choose it, will give you the best human centered experience, right? For you as the content creator and for your audience, right? Again, think about the way in which all of these are designed to interact with an audience, just like with what we were just saying about YouTube. YouTube has the functionality of leaving comments and interacting with your audience that way, but it's really not in a space where people can kind of have conversations. It's not a space where you can build relationships in the same way that you might on, say, TikTok or Instagram or even Facebook still, you know. So, which one is going to be the most human centered experience for you and your personal way of telling a story, right? And it's also really important that when you tell your story, you do it in a way that shows off your brand's values and what you have to offer, right? That is the real reason why you're going to be doing any kind of marketing and self promotion. It's to show off your values and what it is that you have to offer to the world. Feasibility and viability kind of blend together when it comes to this, but it is about how are you going to allocate your resources. Remember, time is a resource and time is limited. Cash, money on hand is a resource and that will always be limited, to whatever extent it is, but especially time. So, how are you going to invest your time into something that is going to be profitable for you long term? You really do have to understand that this is a long term investment. Any type of marketing or social media strategy that you're planning is going to have some sort of long-term effect. And if you can build into that, kind of like future proofing it, things that you can add on later, like the ability to sell stuff through a web store. If you can connect a web store to your Instagram or to your TikTok, that's going to be a way for you to be able to make an actual, income, a passive income, maybe, but it's still a way for you to have an income through one of these platforms. Not all of them have that. Twitter is not designed to be that type of platform. You can share links and you can always get people to maybe, uh, you know, purchase something by visiting the website outside of Twitter. But if you're more of or X, thank you, Angie. Uh, but if you're more of an introverted kind of person, and you prefer to fly under the radar, Twitter might be X might be the type of platform that works best for you and your particular marketing strategy because you can have more one-on-one interactions with people, maybe in a slightly public way, but it's still going to be a little bit more personalized. There are other platforms like Mastodon and Substack where you can create basically what is a list serve. It's a way or a space where you can curate content, share it with a specific few people who subscribe to your list serve. But that's also a way, like another way of approaching, like, say, a newsletter. If you're collecting emails through a website, you can always use a newsletter as your way of telling your story and interacting with people through email. So really think about which one is going to be the best one for you and your style of, interaction with people. It really is useful to ask yourself some of those questions. There's also, some of the tools that have been pretty successful for digital arts. MailChimp was one that I mentioned earlier. It's a newsletter platform that has web and social media integration. It also integrates to our submittable page, so every time a person submits a piece of writing or artwork to be featured in one of our zines, MailChimp collects the email and it allows us to send out a newsletter periodically, giving updates and inviting people to events and that kind of thing. It is a free service up to 500 contacts and 1,000 monthly emails. Um, if you pay for the added service, right, the paid plans, they actually give you access to a scheduler for social media. So if you want to maybe avoid the doom scrolling that could happen through TikTok and Instagram and Facebook and all of the social media sites, you can schedule your social media posts in advance if you pay for the service through MailChimp. Obviously, paying for the service also increases how many emails you can send out in a month and the number of contacts. And it also gives you e-commerce integration. So if you have a website that has a web store, you can actually integrate it in certain, platforms. You can integrate it with MailChimp. So that is a very useful tool for you. Um, Canva is one that is out there in the world that is free. It As far as I understand, the free version is limited to static graphics only, so things that you can print or post as single images. It doesn't include video, animation, or motion graphics. But if you pay for the, like, slightly more professional version of it, it starts at 14.99 a month, and it does give you some simple, drag and drop kind of tools to create graphics for all different types of social media, and some AI generated graphics as well. It is an app that you can use on pretty much any smart device, whether it be a tablet, smartphone, and of course, they have a website too. By preference, though, personally, I would recommend Adobe Express. Adobe Express is part of the full Adobe suite of services, apps, that kind of thing. You can get a single Adobe Express subscription that starts at $9.99 a month. The free version, though, if you want to do the free version, it does give you a limited amount of cloud-based storage, but it does include video and photo editing tools with, uh, I think it's like 25 credits for creating AI generated content. So that's a month per month. And like I said, the paid version starts at 9.99 a month, and it gives you also the ability to schedule posts for your social media accounts, and it also gives you access to Adobe Photoshop Express, which is kind of a simplified version of Adobe Photoshop, but it is Adobe Photoshop nonetheless. And it does give you, some more uh, heavier duty, we'll call it, graphics design software capabilities. So those would be ones that I would recommend. And to actually give you a sense of, what those particular websites look like, if you're not familiar, this is what MailChimp's website looks like. Again, you can do it for free. There is a free version of this particular service, up to 500 uh, contacts in your email list, and also up to 1,000 um, emails that you can send out. So you get a lot of different things that help you with understanding the effectiveness of your marketing If you go here under pricing for MailChimp, you will see the different tiers of service that they have. The first level is $13 a month, the essentials, but you do have a free option that is free until you meet these thresholds of 1,000 emails sent and 500 contacts. If you go over 500 people in your email list, then immediately you get bumped up to the essentials. Um, but you get a lot of good stuff out of this one. Um, Canva is the other one that you may have seen ads for. This is the other one that I mentioned. I have used Canva in the past. It's not terrible. It's actually pretty good and pretty easy to use. There are a lot of templates that you can just kind of pick up and modify as you need. And again, there is a free version here. No experience required, as they say. But depending on which one you go with, I don't believe you get video editing uh, out of the free version. That's at least my understanding. And the DSTL Arts website right here is a place where you can go and actually find out more about the Adobe software. We are sponsored in a sense by Adobe. We are affiliates. So if you go to our website, go to donate and support, click on that. It'll bring you to this page here where you'll see the donation and then here the different ways in which you can support DSTL Arts, which includes purchasing a Creative Cloud account through clicking on these little icons here, these little banners. This is for the full Adobe Creative Cloud. So if you want to get all of the apps, that's one particular thing that you can do. You can get just Adobe Photoshop. There's a photography specific one that includes Photoshop and Lightroom for, I believe it's $20 a month. And then here is Adobe Express. This is the one that I was talking about just now. If you click on Adobe Express there, it takes you to the Adobe Express page, and it gives you a bit more information about how you can use it. But like I said, you can edit PDFs, you can create flyers, you can do your Instagram stories, TikTok videos, and if you pay for the $9.99 a month subscription, you can even build logos and also create branded, what they call a brand kit, where you have, your logo always placed on your images. You can include your own specific fonts and that kind of thing to really get your work looking more professional. And again, you can also get access to their AI app, which is called Adobe Firefly. So, yeah, that's what that looks like. And, you might have seen it already here, but really we wanted to kind of end it with this kind of challenge for you. We call it a homework assignment. It's not technically homework because we're not grading it or checking it for you, but we highly encourage you to continue developing your brand's mission statement and story. Kind of revisit those Venn diagrams that we talked about at the beginning and flesh out the ways that you might want to articulate your brand, right? Your values, your beliefs as a person and as a brand. And then also if you haven't yet, you may want to begin already establishing your brand specific social media strategy. If you are already on Instagram, really take an assessment of, how many Instagram accounts you have, and how much work it is to maintain all of them. If it's necessary, close one or two and focus on just the one that is for your specific brand. The same goes for any other social media platforms that you decide that you want to use. Again, if you're more of a Twitter X person, then create your account for that. And just understand, that there is a particular demographic that uses that particular social media platform. If you're more of a TikTok person or more of a YouTuber, those are things for you to consider. But again, you know, these are hopefully some of the things that can help you develop your your strategy as you grow as an independent artist. Roots, I see you raised your hand.
Yeah, I just had a question. I do agree with you about the social media, about like having multiple accounts on like, for example, I have multiple accounts on my Instagram and it does take a lot of time. But I wanted your opinion on, let's say I have one for like my art specifically, like visual, and then another one for like poetry. Do you think that it would be best to like combine or keep them separate?
In my opinion, it's probably best to combine them. If your social media account is going to have a variety of different things that you're posting, um, as long as they all fall under the same sort of services or products that you are offering as an independent artist, then really there's no reason to have multiple accounts. At the same time though, if you're like, say, I don't know, this might sound kind of out of place, but if you're offering something like Reiki services, which is, kind of outside of the arts, and at the same time you're offering mural services, like those two don't exactly go together. And realistically, how much time and effort can you spend on promoting one service over the other? That's where you may want to kind of take a step back and really think about what kind of specialist do you want to be to get started. Maybe you could do something like Reiki on the side, but if your goal is really to be a muralist and to work as a muralist on a regular basis, then that should be the priority in your social media accounts. And yeah, you can maybe say on occasion on that same account, hey, I just did this Reiki, session for, X person. It was great for my own mental health or whatever. If that's a way to talk about your individual values and the things that are important to you, then, that could work. But as much as possible, especially now that you're starting, my recommendation would be to focus on one, develop that one, and then maybe later start building the following for the other service.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Luis.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for the question. Does anyone else have any other questions?
Will we have access to like any of the stuff that we went over? Just
Yeah.
okay, awesome.
Yeah,
Thank you.
right now you can actually access the slide deck on our Google Classroom, so you can already go ahead and download it off of the stream. I also did upload it in the chat earlier, but once this video is completed, I'm going to be uploading it to our YouTube channel for people to be able to watch it later. And also, it will be shared on the Google Class for our mentorship program. So you will have access to the video and the handout together.
Yeah, because I was scribbling through notes really quick. I didn't get everything I wanted, but yeah, it was really good. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Any other questions or comments, even? And for anybody following along on our live stream or on Instagram Live right now, you can always find out more about our programs, all of our different programs at our website, distillarts.org. You can also follow us on all the major social media using @distillarts. Like I said, our most active one is definitely going to be our Instagram. Um, but you can always reach out to us directly if you have any other questions. Our email addresses are here on the handout as well. It's just our first name @distillarts.org. Um, and yeah, we just are here for really to support all of you as artists. Yeah, we're team Instagram mostly here at Distill Arts, but for the people that are curious, we are going to be developing a bigger strategy in TikTok. So do follow us on TikTok using @Distill Arts. beginning the new year, we're going to have some fresh content. Even actually this month, we're going to have some new fresh content going on.
Luis is gonna start dancing.
Maybe, maybe not. I can neither confirm nor deny.
Abraham's gonna start singing. He's gonna start serenading everybody.
Puro peso pluma.
Hoy nomás con su pinche corrido pesado. Exactly. All right, everyone. So if there are no further questions or comments, then we'll go ahead and leave it at that. Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. I really appreciate you all listening attentively. Again, if you have any questions or anything about our programs, feel free to reach out. For those of you in our poet artist development program, like I said, we are here for you. You are our priority. We want your professional careers as artists to flourish. So we're definitely here to support that.